"You're a burden to our family. Go away." He didn't yell. He didn't even flinch, just looked at me across the table like I was some stranger who had stuck around too long. That was my son, Brian, 42 now. Same hazel eyes I used to wipe tears from when he was little. He said it so calmly, his hand resting on his wife's, like he'd been waiting for the right moment to finally say it. I don't remember if I dropped my fork or just set it down. All I know is the casserole I spent 3 hours making was still sitting there, cold and untouched. It was supposed to be my birthday dinner, my 67th. The happy birthday banner above the fireplace hung crooked, like even it had given up. Tina barely looked at me when I got there, just gave a quick, tight smile and went back to stirring her sauce. The kids mumbled polite hellos, but didn't lift their eyes from their phones. I tried not to take it personally. I always do. I set the cake down, made it from scratch, lemon chiffon, Brian's favorite when he was little, right next to a box of store-bought cupcakes. The room was warm, but the air felt thin. I tried to make conversation, asked about Kayla's piano lessons, Ethan's science fair. Brian snapped at me for getting Kayla's schedule wrong. Tina sighed and said I didn't need to be involved in everything. I laughed it off, but my throat felt tight. After dinner, I asked if we could take a photo. Just one, all of us, together. I said it casually, though I'd been rehearsing it all the way there. Brian stood up. "You don't get to act like part of this anymore." His voice didn't shake. "You're a burden to our family. Go away." Silence. No one moved. Not Kayla, not Ethan. Tina took a sip of wine. I stood up, walked to the door, didn't say a word, left my coat hanging on the hook. No one followed. Outside, the porch light flickered. It was colder than I expected. I stood there holding the cake no one touched. The sky was flat gray. No stars, no moon. Just the sound of a neighbor's wind chimes and my own breath. I thought about my husband. He once told me, "Family is where you'll be seen, even when you're no longer useful." I used to believe that. I used to believe a lot of things. I don't know how long I waited out there. Long enough for my arms to lose their warmth, for the frosting on the cake to turn sticky in the cold. I kept hoping someone would open the door, say something, anything, even just wait. But the door stayed closed. Maybe they'd already buried me. I just forgot to lie down. Still, I waited to see if anyone would come after me. I didn't really expect anyone to come after me. But still, some foolish part of me hoped maybe Ethan would open the door. Just crack it open. Look out. Realize his mom had been standing there in the dark for 20 minutes, just waiting for someone to care. But no one did. I got back to my apartment just before midnight. It's a simple place. 2 bedrooms, beige walls, and a silence that somehow felt louder than a slammed door. I didn't even turn the lights on at first, just stood there in the entryway, shoes still on, keys in my hand, like I hadn't actually arrived, like I didn't know where I belonged anymore. Morning came too early. The light felt sharp, almost harsh. I hadn't slept much. My body hurt in places I hadn't noticed before, like disappointment had weight. I walked to the kitchen. The floor was cold under my bare feet. My phone was sitting on the counter, untouched. No missed calls, no texts, not even a generic message from Ethan. I opened the fridge, not because I was hungry, but just to look. On the door, held by a little flower magnet, was a photo I'd kept for years. The 3 of us at Lake George. Ethan's cap was crooked. Brian's arm was slung around my shoulder. I looked at my own smile in that picture. It didn't even feel like me. It looked like a smile borrowed from some happier woman. I took the photo down and walked over to the trash can. I didn't rip it up, didn't crumple it, just slid it in, whole, like quietly laying the past to rest without saying anything out loud. That's when the phone rang. "Marjorie?" I answered, my voice barely there. "Happy belated birthday," she said, all chipper like it wasn't 7 in the morning. "How was the big dinner?" I paused, caught somewhere between telling the truth and sticking to old habits. "It was nice," I said. "Quiet." "Quiet?" she repeated, a little surprised. "That doesn't sound like your crew." "They're growing up," I said, trying to sound convincing. "Not as loud these days." She hummed a little. "Helen, you sound tired, worn down. You know what you need? Fresh air and real coffee that doesn't taste like cardboard. Come see me this weekend. No excuses." I let that sit for a second. Then I said, "Actually, that sounds perfect." I didn't think twice, opened my laptop, and booked the first bus out Friday morning. Marjorie lives 3 hours north, in this quiet little town full of antique shops and trees that seem to remember what peace feels like. That afternoon, I packed a small bag, just a few sweaters, some toiletries, a notebook I hadn't touched in months. Right before I zipped it shut, my eyes landed on the shelf above my bed. There was this small, tilted frame, a crayon drawing of a lopsided house, big yellow sun, and a little stick figure boy holding hands with a woman labeled Mom. Ethan drew it when he was 6. In the corner, he'd written, "I love you bigger than the sky." I held it for a minute, brushed my fingers along the edge. Then I turned it face down and left it on the nightstand. At the bus station, I didn't wait for second thoughts. The driver gave me a nod. I got on, took a seat by the window. And as the bus pulled away, I didn't look back, not once. Let them notice I was gone, if they ever did. Marjorie hugged me so tight I almost cried, not because I needed it, though maybe I did, but because I'd forgotten what it felt like, to be held like that, like someone was genuinely happy you exist. She didn't ask anything, just stepped back, looked me over and said, "You look like a woman who needs carbs and sass. Lucky for you, I've got both." Her house was exactly how I remembered it from 10 years ago. Maybe a little messier, but in that cozy, lived-in way. Books stacked on the stairs, mugs with snarky quotes scattered on shelves. Out the window, a chicken strutted past like it owned the place, totally unaware that the world sometimes cracks people like eggshells. "Did that one just give me side-eye?" I asked, dropping my bag by the door. "That's Bertha. She doesn't like strangers, unless you bring grapes." I laughed, like really laughed, not the polite kind, the kind that makes something in your chest loosen up. Marjorie lit up like she'd just opened a safe. That afternoon, we baked scones. There was flour everywhere. The kitchen smelled like butter and old friendship. I watched her move, knees creaking, humming off-key. She was older, sure, but still the same woman who once told my college professor to stick his footnotes somewhere the sun doesn't shine after he tore into my thesis. "Remember our garden pact?" she said, sliding the tray into the oven. "You promised if we ever got too lonely, we'd grow old together with thyme and tomatoes." "I thought we were joking," I mumbled. "I wasn't," she said, her eyes twinkling. "You were just too in love with being needed." That landed softly, but it went deep. After tea, we curled up in the living room, each with a scone in hand and a blanket across our knees. The fire crackled. The silence between us wasn't awkward. It was warm. She didn't push, but I started talking anyway. Not everything, just enough. Enough for the tears to come, quiet and slow, soaking the napkin in my lap. When I finally stopped, she didn't give me pity. She just reached over, held my hand, and asked, "You want to stay a while?" I nodded. No speech, no conditions, just her offering me a little space, a little time. Later that night, she handed me a house key on this bright yellow keychain shaped like a sunflower. "In case you come back after midnight," she said with a wink, then handed me a mug that said, "Not dead yet," in these giant, ridiculous letters. I snorted, couldn't help it. That night, in the guest room that smelled faintly like lavender and dust, I unzipped my suitcase. Right on top was the invitation to Kayla's piano recital. Pale blue, gold lettering, folded neatly. I stared at it for a long time. No one had mentioned it at dinner. I wasn't sure if I was really invited, or if they just sent it out of habit, like I was still stuck on some old mailing list no one bothered to update. Still, I didn't throw it out. I slid it gently into the drawer beside the bed, closed it, and turned off the light. I hadn't planned on going. Really, I hadn't. But the envelope stayed right where I'd tucked it, in the suitcase, folded with more care than the sweaters, and somehow that felt like a kind of permission. By Saturday morning, the rain had started, thin little needles tapping against the window in Marjorie's guest room. I got dressed quietly, grabbed a coat with a hood, and didn't tell Marjorie where I was going. Not because I was ashamed, just because I wasn't sure I'd be welcome. The recital was in a high school auditorium in Eugene. Took about 40 minutes by bus, the kind that smells like damp coats and tired parents. I got off 2 stops early and walked the rest of the way in the drizzle, just to get a few breaths in. I slipped into the auditorium right as the lights dimmed and found a seat all the way in the back row. It smelled like floor wax and perfume, and the air was buzzing with chatter. Families all around me, dads holding up phones like they were filming something sacred, moms straightening ties, fixing hair. I sat there alone, coat still on, my heart pounding louder than I expected. I hadn't told anyone I was coming, just sat in the back like some stranger in my own family. I kept my eyes on the stage. I wasn't looking for Brian or Tina. I already knew where they'd be, front and center, picture perfect. Then Kayla's name was called. She walked out kind of stiff, shoulders too straight for a 16-year-old. Her hair was pulled back tight, navy dress, flats with tiny bows. She flexed her hands a little before sitting down at the piano. I couldn't help but remember teaching her Twinkle Twinkle on my old upright when she was 4. Back then, she played with her eyes closed, head swaying with the notes like the music moved through her whole body before it ever reached her fingers. Now, her fingers moved first. The piece was classical, fast, difficult, exact. Every note hit right where it was supposed to, but in between the notes, it felt hollow, like she was building a house nobody planned to live in. I didn't blink, barely breathed. The sound filled the room, but it didn't touch me. I looked around. People were smiling, nodding, filming. No one seemed to notice she hadn't smiled once. The last note landed, sharp, final. She stood, bowed, walked off. Applause rose up like a wave. It washed over me, but didn't reach me. After the final performance, the lights came on. Families rushed forward, balloons, flowers, everyone buzzing. I stayed seated. My hands just rested in my lap. I saw Kayla standing with her parents near the front, Tina fixing her sleeve, Brian handing her a water bottle. Someone snapped a photo. Kayla smiled for the camera. And then, just before they turned to leave, her eyes flicked toward the back, toward me, just for a second. We locked eyes. I didn't smile, didn't wave. I just looked. And she was the one who looked away first. I waited until the place had emptied before standing up, and as I reached the doors, I heard a woman near the exit lean over to her friend and whisper, "Isn't it sad when the music sounds so empty?" That stuck with me as I stepped back out into the rain. I don't know if Kayla really saw me, or if she just saw some figure in the shadows. But I saw her, and for now, that would have to be enough. The cottage smelled like cinnamon and something floral, probably that tea Marjorie always kept in that old tin with the faded roses on it. I stepped inside without saying a word, just set my bag down by the door and slipped off my shoes. The wind outside was hissing, like it had something to say, but inside, everything was still. Marjorie didn't even look up from her chair by the fire. "Did she see you?" she asked, soft and steady, like she'd been waiting all day to ask. I think so, I said, pulling my coat tighter, but she looked right through me. I walked into the kitchen and put the kettle on. My hands wouldn't stop shaking. Not from the cold, something deeper. I just stood there, staring at them, willing them to calm down. Then suddenly, Marjorie was behind me. I hadn't even heard her move. She reached around and gently steadied my hands with hers.
"You don't have to tell me everything," she said. "Just don't let it rot inside you." We sat down on the old couch, knees tucked under blankets. The fire popped softly. Somewhere in the house, a clock ticked, slow and steady. I told her about the recital, about Kayla's blank face, Brian's practiced smile, about how music, when it's played without soul, just sounds like a lie. Marjorie didn't say a word until I finished. Then she handed me this little leather-bound notebook. "Write one truth a day," she said, "even if it's ugly, especially if it's ugly." I opened to the first page and just stared at it, like it might bite. "She used to play with her eyes closed," I whispered. Marjorie gave me a small, quiet smile. Kids carry their parents' silence like a coat they never asked for. Kayla's not lost, she's muffled. There was a knock at the door. Not loud, just polite. Marjorie stood up, mumbling something about young men with bad timing. Marcus walked in, gave his mom a quick hug, nodded kindly at me. He was taller than I remembered, and he looked tired, the kind of tired that comes from work filled with letdowns. We made small talk, weather mostly. Then his voice shifted. "Hey," he said to me gently, "don't know if it matters, but I heard something floating around the university. Sounds like Tina might have an ethics complaint coming her way. Probably nothing, just background noise. But if you ever need backup, Mom knows how to find me." I nodded, didn't say anything, just kept my eyes on the fire. After Marcus left, Marjorie went back to her chair and picked up her knitting. I stayed on the couch, notebook still unopened, fingers wrapped around the recital program I'd stuffed into my coat pocket. I pulled it out slowly. The cardstock felt heavier than it should. Kayla's name was printed in gold. I stared until the letters blurred. Then I tore it in half. Quiet, no drama. Dropped the pieces into the fire and watched them curl into ash. Marjorie didn't even look up. She just asked, "What are you going to do?" I didn't answer, not because I didn't know, but because I finally understood. I don't have to explain myself anymore, not even to the people I once loved most. I didn't set out to destroy Tina. Honestly, I didn't even want to be part of her life anymore. But silence had made me invisible for years, and I'd finally had enough. It started with a box I almost left behind, one of the last from my old bedroom closet, still taped shut since I moved into the apartment. I opened it up in Marjorie's study, just looking for a sweater or maybe a book. Instead, I found a flash drive. I recognized it right away. Ethan had labeled it for me years ago. Mom's Backup 2013. His handwriting was crooked, and it made me smile a little. Inside were old photos, resumes, and tucked in one folder, a set of emails. Some were forwarded, some saved as drafts. I hadn't thought about them in years. They were from Tina. One was from right before her first big journal article came out. She wrote, "I'm using Professor M's work. He's too far gone to care. I'll tweak it enough. This is how the system works, right?" Another, months later, "If I pull this off, I might finally get the tenure track." I'd printed them out back then, just in case, but never used them. At the time, I thought maybe I was being paranoid, or maybe just too afraid. I brought the printouts downstairs. Marcus was at the dining table, typing fast on his laptop. "Got a second?" I asked. He looked up, glanced at the file in my hand, and raised an eyebrow. That looks serious. I laid everything out. The emails, the time-stamped drafts, the flash drive. "Tina's paper," I said.
It wasn't hers, and I can prove it. Marcus took his time, read every word, checked the file details. I sat across from him, still not sure if this was bravery or just revenge. "If this goes public," he said finally, "she's finished." The room went quiet. Rain tapped slowly against the windows, like it was keeping time. "I don't want attention," I said. "I'm not trying to ruin her. I don't want her job. I'm tired of protecting someone who never protected me." He nodded. "You can file anonymously. The university's got a review board. We'll strip your name out. They'll investigate it internally." I hesitated. "Will she know it was me?" "Not unless you tell her," he said. "But it'll ripple. People talk. And if she's made enemies, and from what I hear she has, it could grow legs." I looked at the old printer in the corner, the blinking cursor on his screen, the way Marcus's hands hovered over the keyboard, waiting for me to say the word. "I'm ready," I said. He drafted the report, kept it clean, professional, no emotion, just facts. He attached the documents, cited the emails, scrubbed every file of my name. Then he slid the laptop toward me. "Want to do the honors?" I looked at the screen. It read, "To the Academic Integrity Review Board, anonymous submission." I took a breath and hit send. There was no rush, no moment of glory, just this stillness, the kind that comes when you finally stand up straighter than you have in a long time. Marcus leaned back, exhaled. "It's done."
I thanked him, not with words, just with a look. He headed out a few minutes later, said something about picking up dinner. I stayed behind. The study was dim, lit only by the laptop screen, rain streaking softly down the window. Then my phone buzzed. One new text. It was from Brian. It said, "Did you do something?" I stared at it for a long time, heart pounding, thumb just hovering there. No hi, no how are you, just, "Did you do something?" And for the first time in years, I didn't feel the need to explain myself. The text came just after dawn, 7 words, no greeting, no warmth. "Did you do something?" Not, "Are you okay?" Not, "I'm sorry." Not, "I miss you." I stared at it for a long time, the way you stare at a door that's just been slammed in your face. I didn't reply. I didn't have to. Sometimes silence says more than anything else ever could. But then the phone rang, about an hour later. I was in the kitchen, barefoot, just starting to boil water for tea. The old green tile under my feet felt cool. The kettle was beginning to whine. When I saw the name on the screen, I said it out loud, softly. "Brian." His voice came through low and tight. "Why would you do this?" I gripped the phone a little tighter. "I didn't do anything to you." "You know what I'm talking about." "I know you're angry," I said, trying to stay steady. "But I didn't write those emails. She did." "This could ruin her, Mom," he snapped. "Her tenure, her credibility, her job." I almost laughed. "You think I don't know what it means to lose everything?" He didn't say anything at first. I could hear him breathing. I could almost picture him pacing in his kitchen, rubbing the back of his neck like he used to do when he was 10, when he lied about breaking the lamp. Only this time, it wasn't fear. It was fury. "She's your family," he said, like that word could excuse everything. "No," I said slowly. "I'm your family, and you let her erase me." He didn't answer. So I kept going, because I had nothing left to protect. "Do you remember when you were 5 and you scraped your knee in the driveway? You ran inside, crying like your leg had fallen off, and I held you until you stopped shaking?" Still nothing. I didn't ask whose fault it was. I didn't accuse anyone. I just held you. "Mom, this isn't the same," he muttered. "No," I said, "it's not. Because now you throw blame before you even ask questions. You believe her without even looking at me."
Another pause, longer this time. Then he hung up. No goodbye, no explanation, just silence. And it wasn't just the phone that went dead. Something inside me collapsed, like my ribs had been holding back years of grief, and finally, they gave out. I dropped the phone onto the counter and stumbled outside. The rain had picked up, soft, steady. It soaked through my sweater, my socks, my skin. I made it to the edge of the garden before I crumpled. I didn't scream his name. I didn't call him back. I just screamed at the sky, at the silence, at everything I'd swallowed for years. It wasn't anger, not exactly. It was something older, heavier, the kind of pain that comes from watching someone you love disappear right in front of you and knowing they don't even realize they're gone. I sat there, knees in the wet grass, rain seeping into every part of me until I felt like I was part of the ground. I didn't hear Marjorie come outside, but I felt her hand on my back. He chose her, I whispered, again. She didn't say a word. She didn't need to. She just sat there beside me, in the rain, both of us quiet, not because we were hurting, but because sometimes there just aren't any words left. If you've ever felt like the people you love just stopped seeing you, maybe you get a little of what I'm carrying. And if you feel like sharing, I'd love to hear your story. Drop it in the comments if you want. And if you're still here, still listening, thank you. That means more than I can say. There's more to come. And the next part, let's just say silence doesn't last forever. If you want to walk through the rest of this with me, go ahead and hit subscribe so you don't miss it. But before we move on, let me ask you this. Have you ever had to let someone go just to protect the last piece of yourself? Tina's world didn't fall apart with a bang. It started with a headline. Marjorie slid the newspaper across the breakfast table. It read, "Ethics Scandal Rocks University Department." I stared at the bold letters while the smell of cinnamon toast drifted between us. My name wasn't mentioned, just hers. Tina Montgomery, lead author, under investigation for academic fraud. Anonymous sources, internal emails, irregular authorship. I didn't touch my coffee. By midweek, the article had already made the rounds through faculty circles. The university put out a vague statement. Classes were reassigned. Tina was put on administrative leave, pending further inquiry, they said. Marjorie kept the radio off that morning. We sat in silence, only the soft scrape of her butter knife cutting through it. 2 days later, Ethan disappeared from the internet, deleted everything. Instagram, Twitter, even his YouTube channel. Just gone. He used to post constantly, pictures of his piano, videos of Kayla playing, little updates about competitions. Now, nothing. Just silence. Marcus told me students at Ethan's school had started whispering. One of them had a parent in admin, and, well, rumors move faster than facts ever will. Then Kayla posted something on her story, just a line of text on a black screen. Sometimes betrayal comes wearing your last name. No photo, no explanation. Then she blocked me. She didn't have to say my name. I felt it anyway. No one called, no one knocked, not even Brian. The mailbox stayed empty, 6 days in a row, not even junk mail. Every morning I stood by it, wrapped in a heavy cardigan, watching the wind stir the fallen leaves, lifting their edges like little sighs with nowhere to land. Then, on the 7th day, I got an email. It was from Tina. 5 words. "I hope you're proud, T." No greeting, no explanation, no apology. I didn't write back. I just closed the laptop and walked back to the kitchen where Marjorie was folding laundry by the window. She looked at me, but didn't ask anything, and I was grateful for that. Sometimes silence is the kindest thing you can offer someone. That night, I sat by the fire and watched the last pieces of Kayla's recital program burn, the ones I hadn't gotten to before. The edges curled inward like petals folding in. What surprised me most wasn't the fallout. It was how little they cared to understand. No one asked. No one wondered what came before it all cracked open. It was easier to call it betrayal than to face the rot that had been there all along. I didn't scream. I didn't storm into their lives. I just hit send on the truth. That was all. And somehow, I became the villain. Friday morning, the mailbox was still empty, but I stood there a little longer this time, scanning the horizon like some part of me still hoped, still waited. The only answer was the wind, cold, unapologetic. When I turned, I saw Marjorie watching from the porch steps. She didn't say anything. I walked up and stood beside her. "Maybe silence is all they'll ever give me now," I whispered. She didn't nod. She didn't argue. She just reached out and took my hand. And for the first time that week, I let myself cry. I may be invisible, but that doesn't mean I don't exist. That thought came to me one morning right as frost started creeping across the window like delicate lace. Marjorie had gone into town for groceries, and I was alone in the cottage. Alone, but not lonely. There's a difference, one I've learned to name without any shame. I sat at her little writing desk, the one by the east-facing window that catches the winter sun just right. The garden outside was bare. You could see its bones under patches of melting snow. What was left reminded me of myself. Not gone, just resting. On the desk was an old letter set I hadn't touched in years. Thick ivory paper, a matching envelope. The pen felt smooth in my hand, almost familiar. And I started writing. Not to explain, not to defend, but to give something I'd been holding back for far too long. "Dear Kayla," I wrote, "I don't know if this will ever reach you. I don't expect a reply. This isn't about asking for anything. It's just about offering what I still have to give." I wrote about the first time I held her, how she had this tiny furrowed brow, like she already knew the world would ask too much from her. I wrote about the time she played Claire de Lune with her eyes closed, how the notes fell like petals into the silence between us. I wrote about mistakes, mostly mine, the ones I didn't mean to make, and the ones I should have fought harder not to. And I wrote about love, the kind that doesn't disappear just because someone stops picking up the phone. Before sealing the envelope, I slipped something extra inside. A photo, Kayla at 5, sitting on my lap, her little fingers stretched out over the piano keys, her head tilted back, laughing, and that light in her eyes, it hadn't learned how to dim yet. On the back of the photo, I scribbled, "You still matter." No return address, no name, just a handwritten letter wrapped around a memory. At the post office, I stood behind a woman mailing Valentine's candy to her grandkids. She smiled at me. I smiled back. It felt real. When it was my turn, I held the envelope just a second longer than I needed to. The clerk raised an eyebrow. "Ready?" she asked. I nodded and slid it across the counter. And that was it. No thunder, no music swelling in the background. Just this quiet moment of stillness I didn't even know I'd been waiting for. I stepped out into the wind. It rushed past me, tugging gently at my coat like an old friend. The sky was that deep winter blue, clear, sharp, wide open. And then, softly, I said it out loud. "I'm not lost." The words didn't echo. They didn't have to. I'm just finally standing still. No one heard me, except maybe the wind. But I heard myself. And for the first time in a long time, that was enough. They celebrated with sparklers. I lit a candle, alone. I only found out about Ethan's birthday by accident. One of our old neighbors, the kind who still tags everyone in group photos, posted a picture on Facebook. 3 cakes on the table, 12 people, not a single empty chair. Ethan was right in the middle, taller now, standing straight, flashing a peace sign with 2 fingers. No one looked like they'd noticed one old woman in a cardigan wasn't there. The caption read, "Can't believe Ethan's 18 already, college-bound and surrounded by love." I closed the browser. Spring had softened the edges of the cottage. The rosemary bush outside was blooming, tiny purple flowers. Inside, the bookshelf I built was almost full. Novels, old piano sheet music, and a growing stack of journals that held little pieces of me I hadn't shared with anyone. I made dinner. Just a small bowl of pasta, a cup of tea, and one vanilla cupcake with blue frosting. It was quiet, except for the hum of the fridge and the occasional creak of the old floorboards. I thought about that dinosaur cake I made when Ethan turned 5. It collapsed in the oven, and he cried like the whole year was ruined. I patched it up with green frosting and gummy bears, gave it crooked teeth, and told him it only roared when no one was watching. He laughed so hard he fell off the kitchen stool. That laugh used to live here, somewhere in the walls. I lit the candle. Not for him, for me. The flame flickered gently in the dim kitchen, casting a soft glow over the journal in front of me. I opened it and started writing. Today, I saw what family looks like without me. They were smiling. They didn't notice the empty place where I used to sit. I paused. But I'm still here. I'm still me. And maybe that's enough. Then came a knock. Soft. 2 little raps and a pause. Marjorie. She didn't wait for an invitation, just walked in, holding a messy bouquet wrapped in newspaper. Lilacs, daffodils, something yellow and wild. She set them down on the counter and looked at the candle. Then at me. "No one brought you flowers today," she said, so I did. I couldn't say anything. I just hugged her. She held on a little longer than usual. "You know," she said quietly, "we talk a lot about blood, but sometimes it's the people we choose who stitch us back together." We sat for a while, just the 2 of us. She didn't ask about Ethan. She didn't need to. Before she left, she glanced at the cupcake and smiled. "You didn't even wait for me to sing." After she was gone, I went back to my journal. The candle had burned low, wax pooling quietly around the base of the plate. I wrote one more line. Maybe the gift I never gave myself was letting go. The words settled deep, not like a goodbye, but like a little door opening inside me. Outside, the wind stirred the trees. And for the first time on Ethan's birthday, I didn't cry. I just listened. It had been over 6 months since I'd heard a word from any of them. No texts, no cards, not even one of those forwarded chain emails Aunt Lynn still sends out. So when I heard the knock, soft, uncertain, I figured it had to be a mistake. Maybe the wind had knocked something loose. I wiped the blue paint from my hands, left over from the bench I was restoring, and walked barefoot to the door. I opened it. Kayla was standing there, soaked from the rain, her hair clung to her cheeks, her arms just hanging at her sides. She had a backpack slung over one shoulder, her lips trembling, and those eyes I've known better than my own, were filled with something way too heavy for a 16-year-old to carry. But she wasn't crying for me. At first, she didn't even look at me, just past me, into the cottage, like it was a place she'd only heard about in stories. Then her eyes met mine, and she said, "I didn't know where else to go." I didn't say a word, just stepped aside. She came in slowly, dripping onto the mat. I handed her a towel and pointed to the couch. She curled up in the far corner, like a little bird, unsure if the branch would hold. I took my seat across from her, in my old armchair. The rain tapped gently against the windows. We didn't speak for a long time. I didn't ask what happened. She didn't try to explain. Just silence. And sometimes that's the most honest thing there is. When she finally spoke, her voice was low and flat. "Mom's not okay. She barely leaves her room. Dad only talks to me when it's about grades. The house feels wrong." I nodded slowly, letting her words settle in the space between us. I thought back to something she asked me years ago. "Grandma, how do you always know when something's wrong?" And I told her, "I listen to what's not said." So I did. She looked older than 16 in that moment, not in her face, but in her shoulders, in the way her fingers kept picking at the seam of the blanket. "I made soup earlier," I said. "Chicken and rice, still warm." She didn't answer, but her eyes softened. I brought her a bowl, a slice of bread, and a fresh pair of socks I kept in the hallway drawer. She didn't eat right away, just held the bowl with both hands like it was the only thing keeping her steady. I went back to my chair, picked up my knitting, not really working, just moving my hands so she wouldn't feel watched. And after a while, she whispered it. "I miss you." It wasn't loud, wasn't meant to be. I looked up. Her chin was trembling again, but this time she held my gaze. I got up, walked over, and sat beside her, reached for her hand, slowly. She didn't pull away. "Then let's start from there," I said gently. She leaned her head on my shoulder. And just like that, for the first time in a very long time, the cottage felt full. It wasn't a happy ending, not the kind with confetti or tearful apologies or big speeches on the front porch. But as I sat there that crisp October morning, cocoa warming my hands, I realized something. It was a beginning. The trees in Marjorie's yard were burning gold, their leaves drifting down like the last soft breaths of summer finally letting go. Kayla sat next to me, wrapped in the same knit blanket she used to curl up in as a little girl. Her hair was pulled back in a loose ponytail, and she kept tucking one side behind her ear, like she was trying to stay steady. "I didn't need an apology," I said quietly, not really expecting her to say anything. "I just needed space to be whole again." She nodded slowly, like she understood, or maybe just wanted to. Later, we walked along the trail behind the cottage. The ground was soft with wet leaves, each step giving a gentle crunch under our boots. We didn't talk at first. Then Kayla said, "I'm angry at both of them." I let that hang there. I didn't try to fix it. That wasn't my job anymore. Maybe it never was. "I feel guilty for that," she added. "You don't have to," I said. "Feel it all. Don't push it down. There's no prize for pretending it didn't hurt." She looked at me with those same storm gray eyes her father had as a kid, but hers carried something different, an ache shaped by betrayal she couldn't quite name yet. When we got back, we planted tulip bulbs by the front steps. It was Marjorie's idea. "So spring knows where to find you," she'd said with a wink. Kayla held each bulb gently before placing it into the soil. "Will they really come up?" she asked. "If the squirrels don't beat us to them," I said. And we both laughed. Not a big laugh, just enough to feel it. That afternoon, after she went inside for a nap, I checked my phone. One new voicemail. Brian. His voice crackled softly through the speaker. "I hope Kayla's okay. That's all." That was it. I stared at the screen for a while, thumb hovering. Then I deleted the message. Not out of anger, not even grief, just choice, the kind that comes when you finally know what you deserve and what you don't need to explain anymore. Inside, I opened my journal. The first entry, written months ago in the dim light of a life I thought was over, said, "Today, I exist again." Today, I wrote this. I wasn't a burden. I was just too heavy for small hearts to carry. I closed the journal and looked out the window. Kayla was sitting at the table with Marjorie, trying to teach her a chord progression on the old upright piano. Their laughter drifted upstairs like the scent of warm cinnamon. No, it wasn't a happy ending, but it was mine. And for the first time in a long time, that felt like enough. I never got the apology I used to hope for, but as Kayla's hand rested in mine that rainy afternoon, I realized healing doesn't always need words. Sometimes just being there is enough. We spend so much of life waiting for someone to say sorry, to make it right. But maybe the real strength is in stopping the wait, in choosing to live fully on our own terms. Family can hurt us, but love, when we choose it freely, still has a way of finding its way back. If this story stirred something in you, if it reminded you of someone you miss, or a silence that still echoes, I'd love to hear from you. Feel free to share your thoughts in the comments. I read everyone. And if you'd like to stay with me for more stories like this, I'd be honored to have you here. When you're ready, don't miss the next part of this journey. In My Daughter-in-Law Said, We Think It's Better If You Find Your Own Way Home and Left Me on the Highway, you'll see how even being left on the side of the road can lead to something you never saw coming.